Welcome to Cal Talks. This is Marcelo Valau, Forage Extension Specialist with the University of Florida. And this is our podcast, where we dive into the main topics affecting livestock and forage production in the southeastern United States. Join us in this journey as we tackle the main issues affecting our producers and the sustainability of our production systems. Hello and welcome to Cow Talks. My name is Marcelo Valau, Forage Extension Specialist and Associate Program Leader with the University of Florida. And this is our podcast when we tackle the most important aspects of forage and beef cattle agriculture in the southeastern United States. My guest today is Brett Bultmeier. Brett is the Director of the Pesticide Information Office, and I invite him today here because we have a lot of different regulations coming up in terms of pesticide licensing for the state of Florida, and I think this will be important information for our stakeholders. Brett, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. This is a really cool opportunity. And to your point, there's a lot of changes that have happened, I think, nationally, and then certainly some very Florida-specific ones.
Fantastic. Let me ask you a question first to start. Pesticide Information Office, that's where I call you to ask which things I need to spray in my pasture, right?
Those are the questions we get a lot. What am I supposed to use to kill some particular pest? I said we'd be a little bit better if we were the Office of Pesticide Safety, because that's really our focus, making sure that people have training materials, those that use products professionally, so they can get their license. We'll talk a little bit about that process, I'm sure, today. We write the exams, making sure that people know the information that they need to know, and then general sort of re-education after somebody has a license to stay up to date with everything, all the way to the general public. Again, mostly focused on safe use, how to use, not so much what to use. There's tons of people here at the University of Florida that do that.
Yes, I use that as a good example because I think a lot of people get confused, and the source for information of what to use and where to use is actually with extension agents and extension specialists in the Pesticide Information Office going to help you with licensing aspects of that. Thanks for clarifying that for our audience. So lots are changing, okay? And I want to hear what is changing and also what is the role of the PIO now moving forward. Let's start with the traditional. We used to do a lot of the licensing for FDACs, for the Florida Department of DAC. That is not true anymore. As of now, we're changing to a new system.
That is correct. So we'll kind of very quickly, the EPA at the federal level gives a lot of responsibility to the states. So EPA does, here's all the pesticides. They did a big change on, here's the rules for people becoming certified. And then it goes to the state. And here in Florida, that divide is that FDACS really does the regulatory role. So they take the money for licensing, they do all of the enforcement, they write the rules, whereas IFAS was the educational side and then the testing wing of it. Now, done with testing doesn't mean done creating the materials, doing the training. It just means our extension offices, where testing has occurred for over 20 years, isn't the site where testing will occur. We had already made some changes in 2020, early 21, where people could actually test from home, which was a very popular option. People could test at home rather than going to a physical office. They could feel more comfortable. That will stay. That's run through the same company that did that when we were in charge. And now that physical testing will occur at test centers that FDACS has selected through their partner. Now, these test centers may not just be doing pesticide testing. You may be next to somebody that's taking their SAT, that is taking their hair licensing exam, whatever other certification is there. These are truly professional test centers that are really good at giving exams.
So if we're moving outside of the extension office to take those exams, our extension offices and our extension agents are still a resource for people that are looking for learning about the licenses and getting educated about the technical content of the license, correct?
I would actually say that our extension offices are even more freed up now to help our stakeholders. So for every hour that was spent essentially watching people test, now we can be helping them understand, how do I pass this test in the first place? Now that I've passed this exam, what are my responsibilities out in the field, and doing all the other things that our extension agents do? So There is some loss that you're not coming into the county extension office for testing, but that county office is still there for everything leading up to testing and certainly everything after.
Perfect. So how is the interaction now with the license, especially when we think about, okay, you got a license, people were coming to the extension offices to be able to renew those licenses, especially through CEUs. Is that going to continue?
Yes, in fact, I would anticipate you'll see more offerings at your county office. So now that they're not scheduling these exam days where for 4 hours they're letting people move through and test, that's 4 hours that they could now be doing training. So I actually think you'll see more CEU offerings at the county offices, and they'll be even more freed up to offer those services. Something to get people clued into is that there's a cost now, whereas when they tested with us, it was free. There will be a charge to go test it either option, either at home or in a test center.
So one of the things that we did was a lot of licensing for free. We're doing the test for free to support our stakeholders. Is that going to change now with the new regulations?
That does. These test centers have some additional costs. There's people that are staffed there full time to be giving exams. So if you test in person, I believe that fee now is $59. To test online is $35. And it's up to FDACS and their partners as to where that will go in the future. But that is a big change. It was free to come into the county office and test. There's now going to be a charge associated with that. And there's still the normal charges associated with getting your license. So the licensing fee and the renewal fees, none of that has changed.
Okay. And we still have the same renewal process through FDACS.
That is correct. You can either renew by retaking your exam or by earning those continuing education units.
Which I need to do that myself before it expires. Mine expires next year. So, Brad, one of the things we always do is we keep those old books, many from Dr. Fisher, and that probably many of us still haven't maybe getting some cobwebs there. But we have all those manuals we've been studying. There have not been a lot of change. There has been updates, but not a lot of changes. And we have example exam questions we've been studying. Is that going to continue or is going to change with the new exam system for the licenses?
So there should be some changes. Some of this comes from EPA updated their requirements for all people that get a license. For the state of Florida, that didn't change a tremendous amount. We were already above and beyond what EPA expected as a state, but it is an opportunity for us to update those manuals. As you said, many of them have cobwebs. There are things I cringe at when I see on the exam that I'd love to change, but we can't because it's tied to a manual. So we will be in the process of updating probably all of the manuals over the next 3 or 4 years.
Fantastic. And I mean, not a lot has changed in terms of the application technologies and the knowledge that we know already. I mean, that's pretty standard. How we do things, drift's still the same, calibration's still the same, the pesticide use. So what are some of those new things that you were considering that's going to change?
The biggest sort of topic that we'll cover in the manuals that wasn't before is something that EPA requires called professionalism. And it is this broad term. But essentially, it's could you talk to somebody about what you're doing with pesticides? Can you conduct yourself in a way that is considered professional? So we'll be adding that to the manuals. But I think the biggest change people will see is my background. I was an applicator at one point, and I've worked with lots of applicators. It's making the textbook, for lack of a better way of calling it anything else, these manuals are textbooks, a lot more approachable. So this is making the language much easier to read, using lots more pictures and examples, rewriting some of the exams to not nitpick lots of detail, but to really get to the fundamental piece. Do you know how to use these products? Along with that, we want to have, instead of a physical manual that collects cobwebs, manuals that are online, that are more dynamic, that have more training materials with them. And then finally, having a manual available in a format more like this, a podcast format. I know a lot of our folks that are getting their license are not sitting and reading the manual every night. They're out doing jobs. And if you can, in between fields, in between work sites, listen for 15 minutes and get the information that way, that much better. So to your point, the material itself hasn't changed a whole lot. A label is still a label. Pesticides are pesticides, but trying to present it in a much different way to make it accessible to those that are having to use this material.
Brett, another important thing that is happening that I've heard in a few of the talks, and I have not gotten educated about that yet, and I'm looking for some more information. There are some new labeling requirements in a lot of the pesticides that is causing quite a lot of concern about among some of our stakeholders. Can you explore some of those new labelings and what it means for the pesticide use in the future?
Yeah, so the biggest change is related to endangered species. So EPA is in charge of registering pesticides, and when they register those, they say if you use them according to the label, there's not an unreasonable risk of harm to people or the environment. Well, the Endangered Species Act says no harm can occur. And several groups got together and realized that EPA and the way that they registered products wasn't meeting that no harm for endangered species, at least not to their satisfaction. So EPA has had to go in and really change how they're looking at registering pesticides. And that is now starting to show up on labels. Now, when this first came out, there was a lot of unknowns. We didn't know how much impact this was going to have. How far was it going to go? We're pretty well settled that for most of our farmers, we don't expect massive changes. There will be new language on a label. There's going to be brand new sections. You're going to have to go to some websites. That's a huge change. That if a website is on a label, that website counts as much as the label does. And then it's really a record keeping. To give an example, the first product that we have is Liberty Ultra. This is the only one we know of that has the new language. It says that you have to get 3 points before you can use this product. That's a big change, right? It used to be you bought a product, you follow the label, you use the product. Now there's this points that you have to achieve. Now, getting those points is actually pretty easy. For example, here in Alachua County, where we're recording this podcast, we have 2 points baked into by being in Alachua County. If I use the website that it takes me to, that's another point. I can now go use the product. So there are changes coming to labels. You really are going to have to be paying attention each time you get a new shipment in. But at the end of the day, most practices aren't going to change that much.
So for those that are worried about how they can keep up, and those changes are coming up, especially as some of the products are need to be re-registered or registration renewed, or new products that are coming into the market, how can our listeners can keep up to date with those new regulations?
So I would say really be in contact with your representatives that are your chemical representatives. They should be able to tell you if and when their products are going to get this new language. The easiest way is to check each product shipment as it comes in. Always read the label. And if you're still confused as to what all of this will mean, many of our county extension offices are getting up to speed. And then obviously our office is here to create tools to help you know what compliance will look like with these new changes. But ultimately the label will tell you, and then be in contact with all of those resources that you have.
Fantastic. Very interesting. Very interesting. What is the expected impact, actual impact of those labels in terms of product use? Is EPA expecting something is going to change, or is pretty much bureaucratic regulatory aspects that are changing just in the language?
I think a lot of it, I was telling folks just today that a lot of this is simply record keeping. I don't anticipate, particularly in Florida, many of our farmers having to make dramatic changes to their practices. This is really just documenting what you're already doing and keeping records of that, and that should keep you in compliance. There are some places in the broader Southeast where there may be more issues as you get into land that is rocky, that has lots of slope, where they're worried about runoff and drift. You may have to make some changing to farming practices. As far as when we'll see this on labels, again, we have Liberty Ultra is the first one that we have. I was on a webinar with EPA not too long ago where the anticipation is 30 more products this year, and then that will continue. At some point, everybody that is in agriculture will have a product that has this language on it.
Interesting. Very interesting. So at the end of the day, in practical terms, it's not really changing a lot. We just need to do what we should be doing all the way around, which is keeping good record of the practices, because that is just good bookkeeping anyhow.
I would say that, and getting comfortable with the idea that if there's a website on the label, you're going to have to use a website to be in compliance. And that's going to be a trend you'll continue to see, to the point where EPA has stated that their goal is to have digital labels at some point in the future. That, that paper label being on your product will probably change at some point, and it will have very basic information on the front and then a website or a QR code that takes you to the label. As regulatory gets more complicated, EPA needs the flexibility to make changes. And if something's on a website, it's much easier to change than something that's on a label.
Perfect. Perfect. Brett, we covered a lot of ground.
It is a lot. It is a lot.
Is there anything else you want to bring to our audience that would be of broad interest that you want to communicate, or about the Pesticide Information Office, the services or needs, or anything that you like to bring to our audience here?
Probably understanding that there's going to be changes to the manuals and the exams coming up.
Okay.
With
So-
some of the changes EPA has made, we're going to have big changes.
There you go. Brad, I appreciate you coming here to share with us all this information. Well, thank you for the listeners, and for those interested in more episodes, we have a bunch of other topics related. I think it's the first one related to pesticides in cow talks, but we normally cover anything from planting all the way to fertilization, anything from cows all the way to goats and deer. So it's a very broad podcast. Thanks a lot for coming here today, and I hope to see our listeners in our next podcast. Don't forget to check some episodes in our sister podcast called Forage Nexus, when we're wrapping up talking about the giants of forage agriculture and telling the story that made the life and legacy of those people that shaped how we do agriculture today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
This podcast was brought to you by the University of Florida Forage Team with technical support from the University of Florida College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, Faculty Instructional Resource and Support Team. This episode was produced by Marcelo Valau, Olivia Mowley, and Ashley Kanabrowski. We hope you have enjoyed this podcast. If you have any comments or thoughts to share with us, please reach out to us through our email, forages@ifas.ufl.edu, and find us on our social media, uf.forages on Instagram, UF Forage Team on Facebook, or UF IFAS Forages on YouTube. We hope to see you in our next episode.